Pleasure today of having on the program Nickolas Wildstar, who is a candidate in the upcoming election, the recall election for the gubernatorial office here in the state of California. It's a special election, as many people know, and in the coming weeks, Californians will be receiving their ballots and making decisions. And, you know, the first, and I don't think we're going to delve into it too much, is that there's a recall question on the ballot. And Nickolas is a candidate to potentially replace the governor if he is recalled at that time. So that's two pieces of the puzzle. And as I've told Nickolas, this show is pop politics. And as the cannabis consumer that you are, we're here today to start at least dipping into that topic. We're going to get a chance to know Nickolas Wildstar as a candidate for a state that covers a lot of topics, but he promised us that he would talk to cannabis because he has a history in that space. And so Nickolas, welcome. Welcome, and thank you for joining us. And
it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much. You can hear me now. I'm not muted anymore, right?
Yeah.
Still getting used to this whole Zoom conferencing thing. So I appreciate you taking the time.
Welcome to Pop Politics. Welcome to Pop Politics. And I'm going to start with the first question, very easiest question. Will you give us some background? I've learned a little bit about you, but you came from Southern California. You've transplanted to Northern California, but you've been an active force in politics here in California for many years. And also maybe a little bit of background on your positions on cannabis in general and background-wise.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, I've been a very involved activist over the past 10 years. Got my footing as an Occupy Wall Street protester here in California, and pretty much have been out there as the boots on the ground kind of a spokesman for the people. And of course, there were various issues then that are still relative to now. I mean, you got government spending. Of course, with school tuitions, they're too high, the rent's too damn high, you know, too much government control, and the same old bureaucracy of, you know, that political system that puts, you know, profits over people. And of course, media censorship, that's always been happening as well. So all of those issues we were protesting against then, we're still protesting against now. And I have been doing as a political candidate. I ran in 2014 as a candidate for governor, and again in 2018 when I was endorsed by the Libertarian Party of California. I also ran in 2018 as a candidate for Fullerton City Council, and in 2020 as a candidate for Fresno mayor. So I've been doing my best to, again, put myself out there as a potential spokesman and representative of the people. And I moved to California from Milwaukee, Wisconsin about 20 years ago. So I'm a Wisconsin transplant. But
I'm not going to do it. But the people, you say, don't ever call someone from Wisconsin a cheddarhead.
Cheesehead, yeah.
Cheddarhead's okay, but cheesehead,
right. Okay. Yeah, you can call me a cheddarhead. Cheesehead, we're gonna find words, but no, it's okay. I mean, cheese is one
great.
of the.
I'm from New York. You know, I've been blessed living in California for a long time, but I'm originally from New York. So.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, there's lots of things that attract, you know, people from all over the world to California, and I originally moved here to pursue a career in music. And I was pretty successful as an underground independent musician. I have music on, you know, music streaming platforms like Spotify and iTunes and all of that good stuff. And I even have songs in movies like in Scary Movie 4. So, but with me having a, you know, background in music, of course, and being a weed smoker myself, I've met a lot of people that either were, you know, unlicensed growers or unlicensed vendors. And, you know, it was just a shame to have to see them struggle in providing something that, you know, you go into a shop, a dispensary, and there it is readily available. So it's just a matter of seeing that distinction between what's approved by the government and what isn't. And you know, they're actually creating more of a black market with the laws that exist. I mean, without them, of course, we'd have a free market system, and that's what I more so advocate for as a candidate.
Right. You know, it's interesting to me that you brought up your background as a libertarian. I call myself a demitarian. I'm a hybrid. if you want to talk, in the cannabis, vernacular, I'm a hybrid in the sense that, my social liberal, tendencies go way to the left. You know what I mean? My belief in the freedom of expression and the rights in the Constitution to be a human just being. And that's what this country is founded on, right? You know what I mean? But
Exactly.
on a business sense, I am a little bit more conservative. And on the public safety and law and order side, I kind of fall in that category too. So I always talk about common ground. So, that's a good way for us to dovetail into the story of cannabis. How, one of the things that we've talked about on this program with most of the industry leaders, we talked a little bit about Weed for Warriors, from a guest like Sean Kiernan to who's the leader there, to people like Virgil Grant and Donnie Anderson, who are the proponents of Measure M in the city of Los Angeles, to other people, right? And I asked this question, what do you think is going right now in California cannabis regulation? Because that's going to dovetail into what I would want to hear from you. And you have a policy advisor who and I had a brief conversation with by the name of, I want to say, Daryl Cotton. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes, right. So I want to make sure that people know that you've actually dedicated some time and have some internal campaign staff who are specific to this issue, right? But what are your thoughts right now about what's going on in California and in general? Is licensing working? Is regulation working? My personal rant has really been focused on the consumer tax issue and the price, and that is, I think, supporting the illicit market and preventing business owners from succeeding in a free market as well. So what are your thoughts? I mean, give it to us.
Well, I don't really see much of it benefiting the people under Prop 64. I mean, I know people here in Fresno that have had extreme difficulty obtaining social equity licenses that are being favored towards specific individuals through this whole pay to play, kind of an atmosphere that's now been created. So unfortunately, it's Prop 64, it's one of those policies that do more harm than good, and more so the same of what we expect of government, which is cronyism, crony capitalism, pretty much, over what should be something that's readily available to all of the people of the state. So
I think cannabis has been victimized, by the way, because it didn't come from, Uber disrupted taxi cabs, the way regulation disrupted cannabis. So people were really vulnerable to be taken advantage of in the early phases, I think, of it moving into that bright light regulatory environment.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what I want to move away from, is a overly regulated environment, which is what we have now, something that's more sensible. I mean, which is why I'm glad that you actually spoke with my policy advisor, Daryl Cotton, because he's actually someone that's experienced in the cannabis industry himself. And that's what I want to return to, is more so community creating policies and not lawmakers, and people of the community need to retain that power by being involved in that policy creation, So as governor, that's what I'll be doing. I'll be lending my ear to people of the community and people with greater expertise in that, area of knowledge or whatever, more than I do, and let them be the ones that dictate as to what happens. So he's actually been involved in what I've been doing recently and making sure that the people of California have their rights protected and respected by the state. Right now, under Prop 64, it's not. You still have people being victimized and thrown in jail over consumption of cannabis or sales of it. You have cannabis shops being shut down due to this lockdown, and medicinal marijuana patients being deprived access to what is critical to their livelihood. It's essential to them living, and yet they don't have, aren't able to make purchases. So I actually sent a letter to Attorney General Rob Bonta pointing out the positive conflict interest with state law and federal law, since under Prop 64, we are taxing it, and the state is essentially making a profit off of cannabis sales, which should be, in conflict of federal law, since
Right.
it is, a drug.
And it's funny because I think if I could go just from what I like to empathize, so I'm going to take the some insight from what I believe would be a cannabis consumer. So in 2016, regulation, I think anybody of my age, your age, has probably seen the show Weeds, right? That's the last episode, and you know, the show that ran on Showtime about the early phase of cannabis legalization into the dispensary movement.
Right.
You'd be able to buy it like alcohol in a store, you know, casually throughout society. That you would be able to go to a cafe that was a cannabis cafe, right, and enjoy cannabis like they do and they already have in Amsterdam. And it really hasn't materialized. But I do know that organizing it and bringing it into a place where it could be part of the normalized economy and where it didn't have to be something that jeopardized people's personal freedom, first and foremost with incarceration, I thought was a huge move forward. And I think most people in California expected that they would have cannabis in their community, right? But it since has not materialized in so much of the state. Do you have any perspective on how state leadership could actually do, you know, what it needs to be done to actually, kind of fully realize even the modicum of progress that we've made under Prop 64, since it does exist?
Absolutely. Well, I think we kind of need to reapproach the way that we're dealing with cannabis. Unfortunately, since under Prop 64, it has failed and made this environment where, again, you have medicinal marijuana patients being, being discriminated against and not having access to product. And you also have, consumers who want to again, be able to make those purchases without being treated like a criminal. They still have the possibility of being arrested under federal law and under state law being discriminated against by certain, law enforcement officers or agencies that may disagree with the cannabis laws in the state. So as governor, that's what I plan on doing, is making sure that that supremacy clause stays intact. And since we do have state law that protects cannabis consumption and sales in the state, then I will make sure that all of the people of the state feel safe in doing so. And that's why I plan on nullifying Prop 64. That's actually what that letter to AG Banta recognizes, is informing him that once I am elected, I plan on nullifying Prop 64 because of that positive conflict, and replacing that with the Restoration Act to, restore that medical classification for cannabis. So we can get back to the standards as it was under Prop 215. Right. And then the Restoration Act pretty much goes on to further build on the structure of that. So instead of cannabis being a controlled market, it's one that's more so administered. And we have a proper review board of, use of water and use of resources towards that cannabis cultivation. And it's more so fee-based instead of it being tax-based, which again is putting the state at, in position to be in conflict with federal law.
It's an unsustainable business model as well, I believe. I think that the rate of taxation, and as it is being discussed, and we know it's a foregone conclusion, means that, Washington bureaucracy has nothing to do with it, right? So, I mean, right. That perspective, and I'm just saying that with a smile, because I do believe by next year that they're going to create some sort of, federal level reform, whether it'll be a starting point or be the most disastrous thing ever for, the creativity and the entrepreneurial spirit of this industry, which has been dramatically exhibited, right? And just the personality that's coming to it. It's a dynamic growth industry. I think California will play a leadership role. So it's good to hear that perspective. And let's use this as an opportunity. There was 3 areas that I told you. The California Cannabis Reform Initiative was a starting point for a referendum, or a second citizens initiative proposed, kind of get the industry talking about 2022 and what some of the thoughts might be in that direction. And there's 3 areas that have really been focused on. And I think it would be good for this cannabis consumer public, Cannabis Capital's audience for this show is really a cannabis consumer. What are your 3 areas? Social equity is kind of one of the biggest discussions. I've heard you mention it, right?
Yes.
What are your thoughts about the success or lack of success or progress in the social equity area? And what are your thoughts in that area as a candidate?
There hasn't been much there either. And that's why I think that control over cannabis and cultivation needs to be localized instead of being done on the state level. And that's why the DCA, the Department of Cannabis Administration, would, in a sense, take over for the BCC, which is the Bureau of Cannabis Control. So we're going to replace that with an administrative agency that will, again, make sure the proper CEQA regulations are met, and again, make sure that there isn't any abuse of our resources. But with my Gold New Deal also that I'm offering for the people of California, which is to create a people's own utility, a people's own bank, modernize our transportation system using renewable energies, but also beautification of our state. And what I want to do there is create community gardens statewide. And 151 Farms would be a part of that initiative. You can head over to 151farmers.org if you'd like to find out more about it. But these are basically closed loop aquaponic systems that are mobile. So, you know, it's soilless farming, and people are able to grow fruits and vegetables and even cannabis, you know, using these aquaponic systems. And since they are mobile, we'll be able to have them transported wherever they need it, especially here in the Central Valley where there isn't much water, you know, but we have a lot of land.
See, and I was trying to tell people, right, and I know for you, you know, talking about the Central Valley agribusiness, the state of California generates so much of the nation's food supply.
Oh, yes.
And water is this critical issue in a drought environment. We're seeing it through the fire. You know, I've, you know, watched these fires go and go and go, and a lot of it has to do with the drought conditions continuing to tinder, you know, the natural environment, and then of course for the farmers, right? So those are big picture issues, and cannabis has to be, you know, part of that dialogue because we're partially an agribusiness as much as a retail consumer business.
Exactly.
And so let me then to jump in. So, you know, we've talked a lot about taxes. Right? So social equity is an area, right? And the second one is taxes, right? I personally believe that I heard you mention that the higher the taxes are, the more you're supporting, you know, spillage into the what do you call it, the illicit market, you know,
Yes.
the gray area, whatever you want to call it. And more importantly, for the business owner, it's making it tougher for them to attract a consumer with a price point that is digestible to their historic purchasing, you know, preference, right?
Right.
Because the money has to be, you know, deployed to grow cannabis, so most people are willing to pay a price for it. But with the taxation, it's become onerous. Is there anything you would do in there, or any thoughts you have on that that a cannabis consumer would want to hear? Because are your taxes too high? Yeah, so am I.
Right, exactly. Well, I got something that not only the cannabis consumer wants to hear, but every person in California, and that's I want to cancel taxes altogether, all taxes.
Right. Now we're talking about a whole new ballgame. That would be, you know, a massive shift. Right?
Exactly, and it should be done. I mean, over the past year alone, California has been highly taxed, as always has, whether it be gas tax, property tax, any type of tax. We've been paying the bill, and we haven't seen much of that. I mean, over the past year, we've been paying property taxes, yet our schools have been closed, and parents have had to pay even more out of their pocket for childcare services. Now they're out of work, you know, and so it's made it more of a financial strain on households all across the state. So we definitely could use an economic reprieve, which is why, as governor for the next year, I will be canceling taxes. There will be no collection of taxes, and we instead will be transferring government to a fee-based model, which exists right now. I mean, government already makes a considerable amount of money off of fees alone, whether it be parking tickets or licensing fees or whatever the case may be. So that's why I plan on, again, eliminating taxes across the board. And I definitely think that the cannabis market would benefit from that all around, not only consumers, but like you pointed out, businesses as well.
Right. Okay. And so then finally, that moves us into this topic of local control, right? So you brought it up, and it should be more localized. my experience in working on municipal legislation that was actually put into effect in the cities like Costa Mesa, San Bernardino, Adelanto, some here in Southern California, time, place, and manner has always been the kind of the local side of that. State starts operations, right? So my understanding from what you were explaining on your position is that the state would set professional conduct, but you would be in compliance with that rather than them, granting you some sort of blessing to do it, right? You could just essentially, and then on a local level, do you believe more cities in California should reflect the will of the people in 64, which I think was to have it in their communities, throughout the state, and to do it though in a best practice regulated fashion?
Yeah, exactly. But that's not happening. You have city regulators that are, again, treating growers as if they're criminals, and they're having flybys day and night. They're experiencing no-knock raids across the state. I mean, it's still happening where no matter what you're doing in cannabis, it's still being policed by the state when it shouldn't be, especially under current state law. And that's why I said, as governor, I'll be making sure that that state law is enforced, which is why I'm going to be decriminalizing cannabis across the board. And also, again, nullifying Prop 64 and replacing it with the Restoration Act to restore that cannabis medical classification to cannabis. That way, people can continue to consume cannabis and create collectives as they did before under Prop 215, and they can ask for what is it called, equitable donation.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean,
Equitable contribution. Yes, exactly. And instead of the state taxing on those purchases, there will be flat fees, across the board for those businesses. And as far as personal use, you'll have up to 12 plants. Will be your maximum per resident, across the state of California. And if you're growing those 12 plants for medicinal use, that's more than enough product to take care of yourself. And, even if you have someone that wants to potentially get into the cannabis industry and commercialize their business, then once they can use that 12 plants to build up capital, and then now, go and I guess file for a license with the DCA, and pay that license fee, which is like $1 per square foot.
I've always been interested to go back and do an analysis of, the state sales tax, the difference that happened when they shifted from the 1996 Prop 215 compliance model, which is the mutual benefit nonprofit corporate entity that was paying sales tax, right? And if you were doing it in compliance at the time with the way that Governor Brown at the time was enforcing that law, you were reporting your sales tax to the franchise tax board in California. And that was, I want to get your thoughts on this. You can take it from me or what have you, but this is true. The Orange County grand jury did a report studying the adult use cannabis market rollout since it had occurred. So it's happened in Orange County, maybe it was about 2 months ago, and that it was released, the findings. And they studied the adult use taxation, and it was all about great numbers, that the industry itself ran itself really well. Public safety would benefited from it in terms of policing that industry, but also just in general. But the thing that really stuck out to me was that the children's programs in Santa Ana that had gone unfunded for so long finally had a funding source, and were dramatically improved by a significant, apportionment of the tax dollars collected from adult use marijuana. Now, Nickolas, this is what I thought. So potheads are the only ones who care about kids and their community. How is it that we are being, I would say, almost taxation without representation in a way? Because
Exactly.
but we're not getting the reciprocal investment in helping us open new markets, to better, structure this industry, give people opportunity, SBA loans from the state if we're not going to be able to get them through the federal government for the time,
Right.
Things like that that really empower entrepreneurs, right? So I'm sorry, I went on my soapbox for a minute, but what are your thoughts on what I just said?
No, you're absolutely right. That's why through my Gold New Deal, with me supporting a People's Own Bank of California, which has actually been introduced by legislators already. So they're building the foundation for that now. But as a candidate and governor of California, what I'm offering is to, again, make that available to where people of the cannabis industry are able to do legal banking in the state of California with that people's own bank. That'll also provide an opportunity to give out those zero interest loans to those low income families, or people seeking to start a business. So it's a way for us to invest back into the communities without the major corporations controlling everything. That's what's happening right now under Prop 64, with them collecting these taxes. And it actually goes into secret accounts. There's, I believe, about 1,200 accounts so far that have been opened, where the maximum amount of money that the state can put in each of those accounts is $11 million each. So again, we have over 1,200 of those so far, with with at least $11 million in each account. So with those funds, what's that?
From cannabis?
From cannabis. It's in the AUMA. It's in that act. So if you read through Prop 64, it actually creates those accounts. And right now, our governor is in control of that. I would love to audit those books, find out where that money has been going, and if so, how much is in those accounts, and if it has been used towards helping more children across the state, because I'm pretty sure they haven't. I'm pretty sure it hasn't been towards providing more mental health services for the homeless, or any of the other promises that this governor had offered to us in promoting Prop 64. So it really falls on his shoulders, since he was an author of it, as well as Kamala Harris and Jerry Brown and all of those responsible. So if we end up doing a public audit, a forensic audit of our budget, and find out that there's been some funny business going on, then trust and believe that all of those involved will be held accountable.
Yeah. Well, so let me ask you then, okay, we're talking here, what do you think of cannabis as a growth industry in California, right? Because it seems to me like, you're a free market supporter, right?
Oh, yes.
So, and California's always been a state of innovation, right? We brought the world the technology, entertainment that has defined this global age, right? And of course, agribusiness has been a big part of California's history. What role do you see cannabis in the future of the state economically? I mean, in general, I'm not going to try to ask you about port-driven logistics and clean energy programs, but this show is about cannabis. But I think it's worth asking because it is a growth industry. It does employ people. It could employ more.
Exactly. And that's the future that I see for cannabis in the state of California also. It's awful that it ended up being stagnated with Prop 64 after the passage of Prop 215. But I see an even better path to that innovation with decriminalization, which is what I'm going to be implementing once I'm elected governor, is to make sure that cannabis is decriminalized. That way we can open up the cannabis industry to true possibilities that it could be providing, like homes, like fuel, like paper, and we could have toilet paper made out of hemp and help us out throughout these toilet paper shortages, instead of being reliant upon getting those products from other countries. We could be building them right here in America, right here in California, better yet, which is why we're the 5th largest economy in the world. We take away all of the government regulations and taxation, and now we're moving up that economic ladder. And that's what I would like to see from the people of California. Government doesn't need to tax you anymore or control what people are doing with their lives, or how we survive this economic downturn after this global pandemic. If anything, they need to get out of the way. And that's my job as governor. I will be making sure that any and all state officials, city officials, government officials in California get out of the people's way so they can do what they do best. And that's make California great.
Well, that leads me then to the question. So, I'm not, an expert right, an agribusiness. But typically speaking, throughout history, right, you've had small farmers who really the collective, that sense. So when you talk about the transition out of a Prop 64 model, right, which, you know, that would then shift to something that would you be able to, in an adult use manner, cultivate under a similar understanding through using the collective association? Or how does the adult use market, the free use after the age of 21, as you so choose certain things, cigarettes, alcohol, tobacco, as an adult, you know, society, we can generally agree that that's, you know, right. You know, I believe it's my right to, you know, cannabis now, which is nice to actually have that conversation with someone not too long ago, which is a family member, right? But the
Right.
idea that I could have cannabis and it's legal, it's no longer something, you know, you have to hide from your parents, you know, or something like that. You know,
Yeah.
in that regard. So, I mean, I have to ask that, right? You know what I mean? Let's get you thinking here a little bit with this topic, because
But
I
that's the thing is that there shouldn't really have to be a distinction made between recreational and medicinal. You know, for something that is medicinal across the board, no matter how you look at it, no matter how you choose to consume it, it has medicinal qualities, unlike marijuana or like alcohol or tobacco, which of course, if you use too much of it, can have serious illness, you know, health effects on you or even kill you. Marijuana doesn't have that, or cannabis doesn't have that quality to it at all, which is why you as a human being even have cannabinoid receptors. So even all of the medical information, the scientific information is something that's kept away from the public. So I think education and informing the public has to play a key role in again expanding the cannabis market as well. And I think the free market could do a better job at that than the government can, which is why again my job and my goal will be to roll back government's involvement in every way, to again just make sure that our resources aren't being taken advantage of and abused, our environment stays protected, and that, of course, people are being given the best product available versus something that could harm them in any way. I think that should be the more role of government to play the watchman, so to speak, opposed to the nanny. We have a nanny state government right now who pretty much just wants to dictate anything and everything about what we do with our bodies, whether it be cannabis consumption or, you know, wearing a mask or getting a vaccination or getting an abortion or whatever the case may be. Government is too busy trying to tell us what we can and cannot do with our own bodies. And that's why, as a candidate, I am letting people know my goal will be make sure that your individual rights never get violated and always are protected by this state government.
You know what? We still have a few more minutes here, and my end, right? These interviews don't have to go on forever, and I think we've really covered well. And you know what? I mean, truthfully, I'm honored to have you on because, like I said, any citizen who chooses, and we were talking earlier, any citizen who chooses to put their name out there to serve in civic capacity, right? I always have a tip of the hat to them and respect for that, right?
Well, thank you.
And so, and I appreciate your time here, and this has been engaging. I'm going to let you be the candidate now. What is it that you would want people to know? So that people have said, okay, so I hear what you're saying. You know my issue, cannabis, like I had said earlier, is I think Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, and declined to state. I think you'll find people who consume cannabis at this point in just about every form and function and walk of life, right? So, but what are the issues then, as you know, someone looking at the state of California, that regardless of the outcome of the recall and then subsequent candidates being appointed, now that you have the soapbox, what are like your big touch points in terms of what could be doing, what the state of California could be doing better?
Well, that's what I'm doing my best to do as a spokesman right now is bring to light all of the real issues that matter to the people of the community. And cannabis is definitely one of them, as I said, especially with medicinal marijuana patients having lack of access to product. I mean, here in Fresno, we were one of the last counties to start actually opening up dispensaries. And since the lockdowns have been imposed, all cannabis shops have been closed. So it's delivery only, which has made it very difficult for a lot of people to receive their product when they need it the most. Because if those delivery companies aren't available, then they pretty much are left to, again, turn to the black market. And that could be dangerous to them as well. So that needs to be addressed. But also, when it comes to people being able to afford the cost of living, of course, with this lockdown as well, with people losing their jobs and the EDD, doling out $31 billion plus and fraudulent claims and having actual claims, legitimate claims, still be in limbo. So we need to get the money to those that are in need, the actual help that they need to make sure that they're able to keep their lights on and keep food on their table. And we definitely need to make sure that we're addressing the homelessness issue as well. Republican or Democrat, conservative or liberal. I've spoken with so many people and they all care about homelessness and want something to be done about it. And they think it's awful that we have state governments that has collected, hundreds of millions of dollars in taxes from us and have yet to do anything significant to make the issue better. So I plan on building homes, getting started on building homes using 3D printed technology. These 3D printed homes could be built in less than 24 hours. Some models cost less than $10,000 and they're self-sustainable. So it's a one and done type of a deal, when right now you have a governor spending between $100,000 and $500,000 on containers, 10 by 10 foot containers that have no bathroom, no kitchen facility whatsoever. So what I'm talking about are 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom homes. And of course, we'll make that readily available to those families with small children, our military veterans, and our disadvantaged youth that are out there on the streets. Because another misinterpretation by the public based on the media is that those people out there on the streets have mental health issues or are suffering from drug addiction. And I've spoken with hundreds of unhoused people throughout our state over the past decade that I've been involved in helping the community. And not all of them, I would say about 80%, would say, no, I don't have any mental health issue. I've never even tried a drug, or use alcohol or whatever the case may be. They're just dealing with some type of a economical situation.
The visible presence, maybe a visible presence from the other category, right? But homelessness is experienced in many different forms, right? So what we're seeing as being really hard to stomach in society on the surface, level, may not be the definition of everybody who's undergoing that state and condition. And
exactly. You even have people that
it's a human issue, right? It's just, we have to be decent human. You have to have these priorities in front of you, right? You know what I mean? And I think those
exactly
are things to talk about. It was leading me to a question that I was going to ask you. So, one of the things that you have to do when you look at the state of California from the perspective of a governorship, or even just as a state, as complex as it is, Northern California, Central California, Southern California, right? Those are three different audiences in the cannabis culture, right? When you talked about helicopters, you talked about growers having to deal with that. And I've seen licensed grows that I know up in Mendocino County with helicopters close by, right? And I don't ask for it. And then, of course, then you hear about, the sheriffs in San Bernardino and Los Angeles County and all this unregulated grow, right? That's out there, and it is harvesting significant amount of water, right? And that's a public resource. Would you consider that like legalizing cannabis? But where do you start to land on the issues that Southern California and Northern California are facing, the differences? Maybe we're also a retail market here in a consumption population. I just wanted you to break down your thoughts on Northern, Central, and Southern California, how we can better unify and prioritize the state as one entirety.
Get everybody to sit down at the same table. Right now, they're ignored. and of course, with the people in Central Valley and, NorCal feeling like they have a lack of representation, period, when it comes to government, is definitely an issue that needs to be addressed, which is why I also support term limits for some of these California State Congress members. You should only be able to serve so many terms. I would say just as you would in the executive position, which is 8 years. After that, can't serve anymore. You have to try something else. But as I said to you before, I plan on having an approach where the community is involved in policy creation. So, as governor, I'll be scheduling um, town halls in every county each and every month to sit down with people of the community, and they can tell me face to face what's going on, what they're experiencing, what they would like to have addressed, whether it's water, homelessness, community crime, whatever the case, drug use. We will deal with those issues firsthand and make sure that they get the resources that they need wherever they are. And I think that's the best way to approach it, instead of feeling like I have all of the answers, which I don't. I'm going to get all of the answers that I need from you, we, the people of California. And those are the people that I'm going to be turning to for those answers. So that's why I'm very appreciative of people like Daryl Cotton, who stepped up to be policy advisor and help me attack the issue of what's going on right now with Prop 64 and what's happening with our cannabis industry, because it really is something that affects so many other areas, whether it's homelessness or water use or criminal activity. It's all sort of connected. Bad policing, bad government policy. It's just something that, again, if we were to do our best to deal with, could help remedy so many other issues. So hopefully we'll get more people like that step up to the plate. And that's what I'm doing as a gubernatorial candidate, is making myself available to that, to exactly that.
It is a profound word to say, and I'm glad that you said it, gubernatorial, because it's one of those things, like I said, I mean, I think raising your hand, raising your voice, having leaders who are in office, have to address certain issues, right? You know what I mean? Whether or not the recall is successful is not what we're talking about here, but you're saying if it is, then you have a vision as to how you could effectively bring change to the state. And I think it's a real thing, and a real investment in citizenship when you put yourself out there like that.
Oh yeah, the fight rages on one way or another.
I mean, I'm a proponent of the First Amendment, which I think we're engaging him right now quite healthily. I always tell the audience, being an active listener is more my role, and I'm learning better and better to do that. And it's actually helping me shape my own, perspective on these issues. I do believe that this has been a great opportunity to get to know you, and I thank you for the time, Nickolas. And I want you to close out with me here on I always say two things to someone. If there's anything you didn't get to say because of my questions or whatever, or you want to go back and cover something, right? Um, this is the time to do it. And then secondly, how is Daryl Cotton and you and the campaign staff and everybody, how can people access what you're doing as a candidate, and do some more research or dig into it or send you an email?
Absolutely. Well, I answer your first question first. So, one thing that I want anyone watching out there to know, if you find out more about me, you'll see that I'm currently running as a Republican candidate. And I know that may be distasteful to a lot of people, but I want you to know that I'm a Ron Paul Republican. I value liberty first and foremost, and that's for all Californians. And if you find out more about me and what I've supported, I've always been an independent thinker. I was a longtime Democrat until Obama came along, and I even voted for him since he was promoting decriminalization and change in politics. But when he failed on that issue, I started supporting other pro decriminalization candidates like Dr. Ron Paul and John McAfee, even, and in this recent presidential election, Joe Jorgensen, a woman who was running for president. So I do my best to make sure that my voting record reflects my values. I voted for Prop 64 and was sold on its promise just like most voters. I voted for Prop 19 back in 2010, even though it failed. So my position on making sure our freedoms and liberties as Americans stands true to my voting record, and I will stand true to that promise as a representative of the people of California. So visit my website, wildstar2022.com. I don't know if you can see it up there, but
You know what?
Wildstar.
All right. So listen, whenever we do social media stuff and the future stuff, you'll please have Daryl reach out to me and get all the appropriate contact points. But it's Wildstar, WILDSTAR 2022, right? .com.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I was one of the first candidates that declared my candidacy for the 2022 gubernatorial election, but I was also involved as a volunteer collecting signatures for this recall. So I'll let people know once that qualified, I would be in, and here I am.
I really tried to make it clear to everyone to really create for politics to be a comfortable place for people to have diverse opinions, right? I always had to say, I have positions, but I want to be the active listener, because I think your voice is a good voice for a cannabis consumer to hear. It's a culture that exists, and at its roots, it's an inclusive culture. And it's also been a highly productive culture throughout its history, right? Music, as well as in the production of the product itself and the byproducts, right? The use of hemp, as you described. I personally believe the reason for this show is important is because we've lost kind of the momentum behind our voice as a culture.
Right.
It's important for people to remember that if you're a cannabis consumer, then you're a cannabis voter. And
exactly.
have the opportunity to recognize that and have someone not be uncomfortable about it, right? Thank you for that, because I don't know where a lot of the candidates stand. We will invite some other folks here on the show. I doubt they will have the courage or necessary drive to address cannabis so specifically. And I think that that's something that people should recognize as a cannabis consumer. There's a couple of candidates who are really, I was laughing. Have you seen Denver Stoner?
Yes. And he's a cop.
He's gonna get mad at me. Now I found out he's a cop because he's gonna because I keep bringing it up. I'm all, hey man, you can come on Pop Politics anytime you want, even if it's just a laugh like you and I are right now. But that's the truth. Common ground begins with listening.
Exactly.
And I want to thank you for the opportunity that you gave us here so that our viewers could listen to you, and then more importantly, that I could hear you. And we'll look forward to seeing what goes on here in September. But something I would say is you're still planning to run in 2022 regardless, right?
I sure am. Like I said, win or lose, we're in this for the long haul. And I want people to know that also it's time for us to put people over party. I don't look at party affiliation, and if we can agree on one thing, it should be the liberty, freedom, and justice of all Americans. And I think this is
that too. I think dignity is a big part of life, right? We should all be dignified towards each other, right? And
absolutely
good neighbors, man. Well, listen, dude, thank you for your time. And of course, if anything comes to mind, keep us posted as your campaign evolves. And, we'll definitely be doing an update show somewhere in mid to late September. I guess it's late September in theory for this show, because it'll be a week after.
I look forward to it. Well, hopefully I'll have good news for you then. Thank you for...
Something tells me you're always going to have good news, which is that you're still around, you're still fighting the fight, and that you're focused on making California a better place regardless of whatever comes. And
exactly.
I sincerely feel from you, and I appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
And thank you, Chris, and thank you everyone watching.
All right, Cannabis Capital. So we'll be back next week where we hope to have another candidate in the gubernatorial recall election, and it just might be Denver Stoner talking about public safety. Thanks a lot, man. Take care.
Thank you. Long live liberty.
Amen.